Welcome to the Dharma Doctor podcast. I'm Katie and here with Brad, and we're so excited because we are here with a special guest, Nicole Scott. And Nicole Scott is a mental health counselor, and we're super excited that you're here today, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
This is your first time on a podcast?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a little strange, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. We've done all of four.
Yeah, this is only our fourth time on a podcast.
Fourth
so,
time,
you know,
so
we're
You
still
guys sound
figuring it out.
good.
It's all the microphone.
Yeah.
You get used to the microphone after a while. It's a little intimidating when you're starting off because it's just like this weird thing here, but you adjust.
You kind of forget that the headphones are on.
I don't mind the headphones.
Yeah.
I like it, actually.
Kind of weird to hear your own voice, I think. It's a little jarring.
I have these big, like, lawnmower headphones I wear in the evening when my kids start to stress me out. And I find that, like, if I just desensitize a little, I'm just oversensed.
Yeah.
You know, like too overstimulated. And I'll put them on at night and I'm just like, oh, it's so peaceful here. Yes, I want to hear you talk.
Yeah.
Versus just being like, oh, let's everybody just calm down all the time.
Right.
You know?
Which is kind of impossible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Once you start, that's just a horrible battle. All of you parents out there, I'm sure, know that.
I was wondering how my fiance would react if I just put on a pair of lawnmower headphones in the evening.
I think they're called
funny.
Loop,
I like it.
maybe. Have you heard of those? I think they're called Loop, but they're noise canceling, not full noise canceling, but they're an ear. My husband is overstimulated by sound too. And so like I always say, like, the hardest hours of parenting are the full on, like, after school to bedtime, right? Because it's like energy out and it's pickup time and we're all talking and it's dinner and bath time. And so there's these headphones where you can, like, kind of adjust where you get like 25% of the sound or 75% of the sound. And he doesn't really love them, but I have had other friends who use them. And I think, it's good if you get overstimulated. Because I do think as a parent, the, like, everybody calm down, like, that never works, right? Like, I never calm down when someone tells me to calm down. So I don't know why we use it for our kids.
I think it kind of hurts their feelings, too. I mean,
Yeah.
it just sends them that message that I think we're constantly sending kids, like, a little too much. You're too much, but you can't help it also. It's nothing to feel guilty about. It's just the way it is.
Well, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of your practice and how you came to EMDR and how you work with it?
Yes. So I pretty much just specialize in EMDR therapy at this point. I do use some other tools that I bring in with EMDR that are very helpful when I notice clients get stuck. I really like internal family systems therapy, and I use a lot of mindfulness meditation techniques to help build coping skills and relaxation and to teach people how to process when I use EMDR. Specifically, I specialize in what's called intensive EMDR therapy, or what I'm calling accelerated EMDR therapy, because intensive sounds so intense. And really the best thing about it is that it speeds up your therapy process.
So what is intensive EMDR or accelerated EMDR therapy? And how does that differ?
They're the same thing. Accelerated EMDR is really just my name for it. I feel like it communicates better the virtues of the intensive format to clients. And what it just means is that you're going to be doing multiple hours of EMDR in a session. And people do varying lengths. Me specifically, I like to do about 4 days of 5 hours a day. It's about 20 hours of EMDR. And I'll have a client pick a specific issue that they want to work through during their EMDR intensive session. Maybe they want to work through a specific event, a traumatic event from the past, or maybe they just want to work on anxiety in general. They'll pick that topic, and I actually work with them starting with the genetic history or the epigenetic history. We work with things that have been passed on to them genetically in regards to their issue, and then we move from that going to in utero. We absorb a lot of stuff in utero. We're so connected with our mother. Technically, you really are one. And it's a very hard time for women. Your hormones, your chemicals are so different, and that really affects you. And then it's a huge life change, and you have all these expectations and other things going on. There's a lot of stressors involved with having a new child. So, and us little beings, I think of it as we're just so pure at that stage.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier for us to just grab stuff. So I clear the birth stuff related to the specific issue, and then I start with the, from 0 months old on up through the lifespan till the present day, working to clear everything that's contributed to your problem or your behavior or whatever it is that you're wanting to resolve. And I just love this format because, first of all, it just cuts out so much time. You know, people can spend 1 to 2 years in therapy trying to clear something specific, even with EMDR. And yes, it's a much quicker way, but you have a client come in, you need to sit and talk with them for 15 minutes, then you get them going in their processing, and then you got to close it up. You're spending a half hour of that session not doing any processing.
Yeah.
So,
and sometimes they can't come back, like it's once a month or it's, you know. So when you say that you're doing these, it kind of sounds like a camp, right? Like an EMDR.
Yes, like a retreat is how I kind of like to describe it.
And how do your clients like come to you? Do they like take a week off of work and like you guys have, like, where do you do these sessions at?
I actually just do mine out of my personal residence. I like it better. I've done them in offices, but we get so deep and intense that it really, I feel, gives people the privacy to let go completely. You're not worried about anybody hearing anything or, you know, just really letting yourself express and unwind all the things that need to come out. So I do them out of my house. And yes, they usually take time off. I do a Tuesday through Friday because I want them to have that Saturday and Sunday to themselves to just like, woo. And it's kind of exhausting. Your body is healing and you are detoxing. When you are processing through emotions and memories and you're clearing it out of your system, you're letting go of stuff. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and it's nice to have that time those last couple days. So yeah, and it's about 5 hours. I provide like a neat little tray of snacks and things. I try to make it nice, a little fancy, and we just get to work. And I also find that I build rapport quicker with this way because people are just ready to do it. They're here, they've come to get something done. But also, our EMDR processing speeds up when you do an intensive format. So once you start going, the body learns how to process again. We kind of stopped ourselves. Our culture very much has a culture of, you know, don't show your emotions. I feel like it's getting better, though. I definitely feel like it's getting so much more accepting to have feelings and to be mad or to be sad. But in general, most of us are still carrying this, I don't want to be someone to see what's really going on with me kind of thing. So once you start to let go, your body learns to do it and it just gets more efficient at it. And you're not doing the starting and stopping. And once these files open, they stay open. So in the traditional therapy setting, you open up those memories, those thoughts, those feelings, and then you got to close them up, but they're still somewhat open. And then you got to go home and deal with it and do all your stuff. In this setting, I have all the time we need to clear it. So you're in a good space. And then if we're not at the end of the day, I have 5 hours again the next day to just keep it moving. So it's really, I find it safer than I wouldn't say EMDR is unsafe by any means, but there is a lot of work that you do as a therapist to help contain the session within the session, so that people can feel good afterwards and you don't really have to worry about it in this type of format.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. I don't actually think we've ever had a really conversation about what it means to clear something. Like when we're saying, what are we clearing? What does that really mean within the context of EMDR? And then, you know, what are some of the downsides of having to recontain at the end of a therapy session versus, you know, I mean, are people continuing to process when they go home? And what kind of tools can we give them to continue that processing?
So to answer your first question, what is clearing? What does that really look like? And to me, clearing is, so let's just take a specific event. And usually our issues are related to a multitude of events that are tie into maybe a core belief, like I'm not good enough, or just tie into low self-esteem in general. So during EMDR processing, we do something called a float back, and we try to go back, or at least different therapists use different methods. But I really believe in the going back to the earliest memory. It's kind of like if you were to pull out a sliver, if you only got the top half, or if you didn't get the roots, it's not totally. So to me, clearing really means getting down to the earliest, the very beginning, when this belief I'm not good enough really started, you know, or a belief that maybe I need help. And you start to process through, let's say, the specific event that you learned you weren't good enough. You know, just like any human parent does, you tell them not to do something they're not supposed to do, or they do something and then you try to correct them. And we're sensitive little beings when we're young and little. And so we slowly but surely begin to learn, oh, I'm not good at that, or I need help with something, or etc. So we take like maybe that very first event and the emotions that came up in that event, which were maybe sadness or rejection. We have a multitude of emotions. When you feel, oh, let me back up a little. When an emotion has a lifespan naturally of like 3 to maybe 15 seconds. So when we just feel it in the moment, then it's gone, from its beginning to its end. But we stop it, we learn, oh, don't cry or don't be upset or etc. Then that energy just literally persists within the body until it's been expressed, felt, moved through the brain. There's different ways that an emotion can leave the system. You can think about it and feel better. You can feel it just physically and feel better. You can feel it and not even have the story or situation or memory attached. You can just, which we'll be doing in the body scan, when you go in and you just feel inside your body, you're processing old emotions. So when you've felt an emotion through to its completion to the point where it's not there within your system anymore, that's been cleared. And so all the emotions that are contributing to the belief, I'm good enough, once you've felt all those fully, and that doesn't mean you have to feel every little bit about it. Like I said, it's 3 to 8 seconds, and you can feel more than one emotion at the same time, right? You can feel rejection and sadness, and you can be angry and disappointed in yourself, very common emotion pairing. So, yeah. And then what was the second question?
I guess the second question was, so if this is the goal of, opening these things up and clearing them, in traditional EMDR, we might only get to partially do that, right? Like we open it up and then we kind of say, well, that's as far as we can get today. Now you sort of go home and good luck with that. Or, in traditional therapy, we're doing this sort of like partial processing. Mm-hmm. And so what are the negative implications of that? Or what are the effects of that could be produced in your clients?
Well, for one, like something I'm always interested in after a client's EMDR session is I'll ask them what kind of dreams they have. So we will keep processing, and you'll have emotions pop up later on. And depending on what your history is, what different events you've experienced in the past, some people, that's very hard on them. It's stuff that scares them. Let's say, for example, it's stuff that maybe makes them feel helpless. So they aren't good at like advocating for themselves and doing other things, which is why, of course, we've kind of buried a lot of this stuff, because when we're just sitting with them and not processing them, they tend to have negative impacts on our behavior and how we interact and how we feel in different environments, right? Although those things are still somewhat there, even if the file isn't open. Like if you have a multitude of files around a specific type of anger, that's why you're overreacting in certain situations. But to do that every single week, consistently open a little bit up and then get through a little bit and then, wait a day or maybe 2 or 3 days to have it all kind of calm back down, then have 3 regular days or maybe 5 regular days, but then go and do it again. It's just, for a lot of folks, I think it's hard on them.
Yeah.
And they don't even recognize that they're starting to move away from maybe wanting to come to counseling or wanting to come to therapy because they're trying to avoid what that felt like when they opened all that stuff up. I've done plenty of weekly therapy kind of sessions when I've noticed, okay, that was a lot for them, and now I didn't see them this week. And even though it was like, oh, we really got a lot of great work done last week, for them it's hard. Mm-hmm. And it's not always hard. I mean, there's definitely, you can get good at containing with clients, and learning those coping skills to help you contain is definitely beneficial. But what I think is so cool about the product that Brad and you guys are developing is that they could then go home and help and have something. It's nice to have a specific tool to just get up and grab. Like, maybe you could do it something totally independently on your own, but that really helps build your desire to follow through. When you have like something, I'm just going to go grab my tappers and I'm going to sit with this for a minute and then move on. And how much more empowering is that than just having to always reach out?
It's true. Therapy doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist. We can't just go to the therapy, do the thing, and then we go back to our real lives, right? Like it's all part of our lives, and we're carrying these experiences, and they're building or compounding, and we're processing and we're healing. And sometimes, I get these questions that are like, are the tabs dangerous? It's like, well, no. I mean, people are constantly processing on their own. We have this worry that people are going to try and process something on their own, but that's
doing it anyway.
We're doing it anyway.
It's the not processing that is worrisome. Yeah. It's the things we literally do build up to a point where we reach our tolerance, and bad things happen, and we end up in divorces, and we end up yelling at our kids, and we have so cultured these things as bad or what we don't want to happen that we're not just like, this is just human nature, this is just and we all just need to be naturally processing. And if the goal for anybody needs to be to grab your tappers, to grab your whatever it is, and to go and start feeling things. I mean, from just a physical health standpoint, we are dealing with so much more stress in our lives than I think people ever have. We're balancing so many different types of commitments. And all of that releases cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And if you're not expending and using those things, then you're having a bunch of stuck energy that's causing what lay people would call adrenaline, causing anger and frustration and irritation and impatience, and which ultimately just leads to feeling unsatisfied with yourself. None of us want to be that person, but we all have been, and we all are sometimes. And we need multiple types of tools to reach people in different situations for what's going to be effective. And we have got to make stuff more open and available. And we've got to, just doing one thing in a certain type of setting, especially with the way we have already cultured mental health in our society, means that you have a problem. Well, we all know that we all have problems. It should just be yeah, of course I'm going to go do my thing that helps me. We love exercise, but we know we're not all out there exercising, right? What about for the rest of us, And once you're doing this, then you're going to be exercising more. It's really hard to build a regular exercise routine when you've got layers of stuck emotions within your system that you haven't processed.
Yeah.
That's a really great analogy. We often the exercise is sort of the preemptive, ongoing space, and then we have medicine, which is diagnosing a problem and solving that problem once it's occurred. But they're integrally connected, right? If you're exercising, if you're stretching and you're healthy, you're less likely to have these problems come up. And the same thing's true in mental health, right? Where it's not always diagnosing a problem. We get to this place where we have to come with a diagnosis, and then we have to solve that diagnosis. But really, there's a whole series of things we can be doing along the way to help process and let go and move that affects it. And so we should think of it more like exercise.
Yes, absolutely. And I liked what you said about, with the medical system, we have to diagnose. And I think that is a deterrent for the mental health system too, is just getting that label, that diagnosis. The truth is that the book that we use to diagnose people in the mental health field, called the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, isn't especially reliable. Mental health is not something we can test for like we can cancer and say, yes, this is what it is. It's a cluster of symptoms that heavily overlap. And I believe I've read here and there that the actual efficacy of the DSM is something like 55 to 65% accurate. But the truth of the matter is these are made up disorders based off of a cluster of symptoms that people experience from real life events that every single one of us go through. Yep. And what causes symptoms, anxiety, depression, frustration, anger, poor sleep, poor appetite, too much appetite, all those different types of symptoms, is the body not functioning as it should. And when you have, and we have hundreds and thousands of stuck emotions within your system, vibrating at frequencies that aren't good for it, it affects the fascia, it affects the organs, it affects your pulse, it affects your bloodstream, it affects every little thing that's within there. And it's amazing how I've worked with clients who have gout, and they'll go through an intensive EMDR session and their gout will be gone. And so did they have depression, or did they just have what every single one of us has? It's just when it gets to a certain point, it's causing a physical illness or a mental health disorder. And it's just once we're labeled with those things, we carry that. It's in our permanent medical record. And that's another thing I like about the intensives is the way I do it. I don't give out the diagnoses unless there's something specific reason we need to for insurance purposes, but we're just there to process old emotions.
And what made you move from, is it just because of doing therapy in the traditional setting for so long and kind of feeling like you wanted more from that, or wanted to give your clients more, that kind of had you come up with these sort of intensives and these camps? Are you seeing overall just it's much more successful for
Well, I mean, I'd heard of EMDR intensives from different trainings that I'd had, different teachers. A lot of the folks who are doing trainings out there in EMDR have been doing EMDR for a while, and they just, I would say not all of them, but many of them will naturally move to more of an intensive EMDR format because if you can clear it, why not just do it? Who wants to wait a year?
Right.
If I could be over this next week,
Yeah.
oh my God, like imagine it. I know it probably sounds like it's too good to be true, but it's amazing what you can do when you just sit down and you do the work. So the idea of that to me was just exciting. So then I took myself and I went and did my own EMDR intensives, and it was incredible. All the relief. I was going through a really hard time after my divorce, and I needed support, and I did not want to wait. I was like, I've got 2 kids, young kids. My kids were 2 years old and 6 months old during my divorce and after my divorce. And I ended up with full custody of my kids. And I was like, I don't need to get better in a year. I need to,
Right.
to me, it was like, this has to happen tomorrow because I've got A, B, and C and these 2 little girls to take care of. And I don't want to feel like this anymore. And of course, the divorce helped me get to doing the work in the intensive kind of way that it really needed to be done to motivate me. So I don't regret any of that. But as I feel like we all kind of look back on those experiences in our life that where we hit rock bottom, so to speak, but I don't even like that word, I like to say it, we've reached our tolerance point.
Yeah.
We all get to a certain place where it's like, and we seek out change. We're like, I don't want this anymore, and we will, naturally, we should put up with things for a certain point until we've discovered that it's not good for us or to try different strategies to make it work. But for me now, it really just comes from this place of I feel I want people to get results quicker. I need that in my practice. I need to see progress. That's definitely, I think, a big burnout thing. I wouldn't say therapists are going around feeling burnout because they're not making progress, but it's definitely energizing when you're making the kind of progress that you do in EMDR. So it really just fills me up and charges me. And when I do the intensive format, I just have one client that I'm seeing that week, and I'm just focused on that one person. I'm not carrying around 10 to 30 different folks' stories because I'll get to a certain point where I start waking up, not worried about a client, but I'm literally processing their stuff for myself.
That sounds amazing. And I think that's what so many people are looking for. I think we all are. It's with everything, like you were saying, right? Like you want to be healthy now. You want it to stop now. And I think often with mental health, that sends you to a diagnosis, to medication, because you think this is going to help you, when this is such an amazing alternative to that. Mm-hmm. Not to say that medicine doesn't have a place, and obviously I'm not discrediting that, but it is really,
me neither.
And I think that's why the tabs, like you said before, it's just what can help me right now, because often feeling, whether you're all the way in crisis or you just feel like I just don't like the way I'm feeling, if there was something out there that could help you, I mean, I think that sounds amazing.
But then even after that, you're still just going to have stuff, and you're going to be better at feeling things after you've done it. And but if you had that exact tool of your own with some other resources related to it to help you do your own processing. I mean, after I've done a 20-hour intensive with somebody, I will very often say, you should buy your own tappers and you should do this. And then you can call me up after that. I'll do shorter sessions with people a day or hour, 2 hours, just to help them work through different chunks. But I really want to facilitate them doing their own work and dealing with things as they come up.
In the world of mental health tech, there's this weird, and this is also the same for the world of therapy, there's sort of a weird counter force, which is, companies want people to be dependent, right? Mm-hmm. Companies want some sort of dependency where you are either dependent on a medication or you're going back over and over and over again for therapy. And even if we say it, like, there are economic incentives to having a customer base that's coming back. Mm-hmm. But the goal of therapy really should be building autonomy, right?
Absolutely.
It should be empowering individuals and giving them the tools so that they don't come back. We should be working ourselves out of a job over time, more or less. But, the demand is, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But that's the goal. We want to empower people to do stuff on their own.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the more people are always going to need some extra help. I'm really good at this, and I can't always rely on myself and my own tools. But the more people who get help and get over this stuff, the actual more momentum that's going to create, energetically across the planet for people to do more. People are talking about it. People are just in general feeling better. And you sense that and you pick up on it and you want it and you ask. And when you've experienced something that really helped you, you talk about it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a poor fear that's not grounded in reality, you know, that more will actually come from doing more and helping people do more on their own. But it's true. We operate in a form of scarcity. You know, we don't operate from a place of abundance. And when you are operating in, at least my belief, that when you're operating with scarcity, you're attracting, there's not enough, or they're not like, you know. And I think that's some of the reason why I don't think people do it consciously. I think it's a very fundamental feel that we won't have what we need, right? I mean, genetically, I'm sure that's been passed down to us. You know, that there has been scarcity out there. There's been famines, there's been starvation, there's been all sorts of different things, right? So there's core reasons that we're not aware of that we're operating in that, but we want to overcome that, right?
We didn't ask, and we kind of have been doing this across the board, is just we kind of jumped into it. But for someone who has never experienced this before, and like we said, it's pretty universal to have things you want to fix about yourself, and EMDR may be perfect for you. How do you personally explain what you do? Like, how do you describe EMDR to someone who hasn't ever experienced that kind of therapy?
Yeah, excellent question. So I really start out with kind of an explanation we already talked about a little bit earlier, is that we're processing through an event that caused negative emotions, and that those emotions didn't get cleared all the way because we didn't experience them fully. And how EMDR helps us is it does more than just the bilateral stimulation. It also creates a space in which to just experience and feel those things. But when you couple experiencing and feeling the emotions attached to events that cause those emotions, or did the event cause the emotion, or did our head cause the emotion, events that in which those emotions came up, and you offer bilateral stimulation, it activates the brain in such a way that it's going to start using more of its faculties to process it through. So, but you really do, and I think it'll be useful, you can certainly add this to your own tappers that you do. You need to learn to just sit and feel with it. And once you've fully experienced and feel it, there's another level up that then that'll go into the higher level of functioning. And the bilateral stimulation will bring you there when you're ready. It'll help you stay in the part of the brain that you need to stay in to experience the emotions fully. But so, for example, we're all doing this. This isn't related to trauma. We're all going into fight or flight mode all day long. We're all releasing cortisol and epinephrine and dopamine and norepinephrine. And those chemicals are created when you go into the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So when those different chemicals are released within the system, you struggle using your executive functioning, using your higher level of thinking. So once you've released the emotions that were also attached to those chemicals that are still sitting, lingering in your body, the bilateral stimulation will help you very more quickly attach to ideas that are going to help you feel better about the situation that occurred. So it might be finding forgiveness and compassion. When you've got more parts of your brain lit up from the bilateral stimulation, you're accessing files that help you remember a time when maybe you reacted in that same fashion, or a time when you recognize that in your parent and you still love your parent. So your kids are going to forgive you, you know, and that you were doing the best you can. You're having all these other areas and files and memories active that are resources for you overcoming the bad thing that happened. There's a great story I like to say that they teach in many of the EMDR trainings, is a vet using bilateral stimulation to process through an issue that he's having with somebody he works with. So this individual that he works with really irritates him. He's super frustrating. He feels like this person is extremely incompetent. He doesn't understand why nobody else in the office cares about why this other person is not able to get their work done, is causing problems for everybody else because they're not doing a good job, and infuriates him. He's talking to his therapist, and they're using the tabs vibrating in right, left hand. And the first time he talks about it, he says something like, I guess maybe it's just not as upsetting to other people because they haven't been through what I've been through. Then you stop and you start the tab. He says that they start and they stop the cabs, went through again. He's like, because I guess it's really not a life or death situation at work. And he was able to access this part of his brain that was able to connect, oh, I'm responding to this man's incompetency as if it's putting somebody's life at risk. And he recognizes it's not. And then the tappers keep going. And then he's like, yeah, I guess actually when I started, I was just like that too. And then the tappers keep going again. And then he's laughing at himself. He's like, I just can't believe I made such a big deal. This really isn't, this is what everybody's like when they start out in this field. They're all making these mistakes and yada, yada, yada. And that's kind of the power of EMDR. It really helps you see things in a different way.
Like provides that perspective that maybe you're stuck and can't get on your own.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's not mine. They developed it at the trainings and everything else, but it does help you see the power of using bilateral stimulation.
I like the story too because I think that we've talked about this with a couple other practitioners is that it doesn't always have to be trauma related, right? Mm-hmm. And that one can be possibly a PTSD thing or something else, but we all get stuck. We all have these emotions and that there's a lot of different use cases. And so it doesn't just mean because someone called it like the big T trauma and the little t, where it's like, it doesn't always have to be that, right? There's such a, it's useful in a lot of different use cases.
Oh yeah, I remember the last important job interview I had and I was feeling anxious about it. So I used some tappers to work through my anxiety about it, recognizing that when you use EMDR, oftentimes you'll identify what the core belief related to it is. So my core belief might have been, I'm going to get rejected. We've all carrying that around to some degree. We have fears of being rejected. So it's definitely, it got connected so much with trauma because the VA recognized how effective it was at treating trauma.
Yeah.
But it can be used for literally everything. And it also can be used to, once you've processed through stuff, if you would rather believe something else, like instead of there's something wrong with me, there's a lot good about me, or I'm lovable and I'm wanted or I'm cared for, you can then use the bilateral stimulation at slow speeds to help instill the positive beliefs. But what we found is that that is much harder to do if you haven't cleared the negative belief, right? Yeah. So if you're believing that you're unlovable, then you're going to have a hard time believing that you are lovable. Once you've cleared that, then you use bilateral stimulation along with the belief I am lovable, and it starts connecting up new neural pathways in the brain that connect up all the times in your life that you were lovable, all those wonderful experiences that you had where you could believe that. And so that's another example of how the bilateral stimulation and how EMDR really works. It's just bringing online multiple resources, which are hard to get out of when you're bringing up memories that, and if you've had layers of emotions. So we talk about, you said big T and little t. Well, 40 little t's turn into a big T at some point, right?
It's like affirmations on overdrive, right? Like we give them superpowers. So we do these affirmations, but we can use bilateral stimulation to actually build the neural pathways and, activate those parts of the brain that can make those things real. I also, people are doing affirmations, and unless we clear away the old belief and the old baggage and the old emotions that are stored there, it's hard to get there. I really appreciated that. Nature doesn't like a vacuum either. So once you have cleared it away, it needs something to replace it with. We have to have some new belief or some new operating system by which to navigate the world. So it's kind of a natural progression.
Absolutely. And you will do that naturally. Like if you didn't go in and instill the positive belief using your tappers, once you've cleared that, it creates the space, but you might as well help facilitate it.
Right, and we can all use that.
Yeah.
More of the good in.
I remember an old love and logic training that I went through. I've done a lot of work with kids with having different types of behavior issues, and they would say that using positive words to reinforce things that if they're having really low self-esteem, it's actually ineffective. If you tell them they're good at and they have the belief that they're not good at, they're probably going to have anywhere from 2 to 4 thoughts come up in the moment that you said that of why they weren't. So it's actually better to create experiences for them where they can feel good about themselves and recognize it and be like, you got that correct, instead of like saying a statement like, you're smart.
Right.
Like just pointing out the actual behaviors to help them begin to notice, to create a new belief versus and a new memory of what they're capable of. But I feel that like if I'm not feeling pretty one day and somebody says you look great, I'm thinking, BS, but
Right.
okay.
Yes. Right. Like you need to feel it yourself, right? Because of examples of I looked in the mirror and I feel great today, or I worked out and I feel energized in the morning in a way I haven't. And yeah, that's all great. I want that as for my parenting, right? It's like to remember
Yes.
because they're so impressionable when they're little and you think you say these great statements all the time. And then you see kids that still struggle or think they're not good at something at school. And you're like, as a parent, it's hard to know, you know, my daughter comes home and she's like, worksheets are really hard. She started first grade this year and she really doesn't like the morning worksheets. And I'm like, I'm sure you're doing great. It's like, I don't know that. That doesn't make her feel better. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's go and bring home one of your worksheets
Yeah,
and let's look at it
it.
and let's find out. And then they can know, and then you can point out all the things that they did correctly. Absolutely. And that gives them experiential learning, they call that.
Well, we've talked a lot about finding these emotions and the way they're stored. And we discussed this a little bit before you came on, but this idea of a body scan. And what is a body scan? All right. So, yeah, I think we'll take a quick break, but then I think we want to explore how to do a body scan.
Oh, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to walk you guys through one of those that I did.
Awesome. Okay.